Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this cool 50-degree Fahrenheit evening. Oh, do I only wish it was 50 degrees Celsius out here. So, let's see. How do we even start this one out? If you've seen the title, you may not know what I'm about to talk about. And to be very honest with you, probably 6 months ago, I wouldn't have had any idea what I was talking about. Let me ask you this question. Do you think that the poison in your food, the nature of poisoned food today, fast food, produced food, was just a sort of serendipitous bunch of corporations that sort of slowly over 100 years just started seeing the game? They could shave a little bit off here, a little bit off there, sell crap as food, and so they just took advantage of it. And then eventually y'all kind of looked at each other and winked and like, yeah, we're all doing this, right? Well, then, if you believe that, which is, quite frankly, the only thing I'd ever heard prior to this subject matter was that the Rockefellers always said they wanted to own everyone from cradle to grave. But then, you're kind of like, okay, so they own the hospitals I'm born in because they freaked my mom out that she can't have a kid any other way. Obviously, you immediately start using all their products the second that you're alive. You're buying your clothing from them, your food, now your water. And so they can poison you slowly over time by really making you addicted to the things that taste good but are really bad for you, from alcohol to sugar. And of course, you're going to end your life sooner than you should because you're not healthy. They tell you all kinds of ridiculous stories about the past where we used to live shorter lives and stuff. Yeah, at times we did, but at times we lived much better lives. This is about Codex Alimentarius. And what I'm about to tell you is that after World War II, even though the engine was started in the eugenics realm way before that, at least 40 years, 45 years before the end of World War II, they've been trying to sterilize people and obviously not tell them all the time that was what was going to happen. But after World War II was over, there was a program that was hatched, built out of some laws that were actually decided potentially 100 years before that, to control everything that we consume as human beings, with the sheer intent of controlling our lifespans, our mental aptitudes, our physical aptitudes, etc., etc. And I'll just give you a really quick sort of litmus test here, because I was always told that in the mid-50s in the United States of America, a police officer had to be at least 6 feet tall. And you can't make a standard like that if you don't have 6 foot tall people in ample supply. But as the 70s rolled around, and especially the 80s, we got so malnutritioned with crappy food that we shrunk again. And now that standard's lifted. Why did they want you to be 6 feet tall? Well, it wasn't a prejudice thing for tall people. It was that you needed to be big enough to manhandle criminals of all sizes, many of which are 6 feet and bigger. It was part of the strategy of staying alive for a police officer. This all starts in Germany with a company called IG Farben. And I have tried to find this dude's name for days, and I can't find his freaking name. But at the time of World War II, the founding member or president of IG Farben participated in the construction and management of the Auschwitz concentration camp. The gentleman who is known as the genesis of bringing this Codex Alimentarius to the United States and essentially the First World supposedly wrote in German over the Auschwitz camp. Right when you go inside, it says, through hard work comes freedom, something like that. When the war was over and all these Germans were put under the Nuremberg trials and what have you, this guy lets all of his buddies get massive sentences. But this dude, just like Operation Paperclip, where a bunch of people that tortured people, built V1 and V2 rockets, were smuggled in the United States, this dude supposedly did 1 day in jail and was released because he had something to offer. His big plan was to control food, to essentially say, look, we've developed a bunch of interesting chemicals, because IG Farben was a pharmaceutical company, also made chemical weapons, as I understand it. I guess eventually they were bought up until now their remnants are inside the company Bayer. But after the League of Nations rolled over and became the UN as we know it today, he went to them and he said, look, I think that I've got a plan here. And the idea is very, very interesting. It's sort of one of these things like, if you are a grasshopper, let's use Bug's Life from Pixar as an example, and you wanted to pounce on a big farm of ants, well, the one thing you can't do is go straight up to them and say, I'm going to take you out, because the ants will eat you up and take you out. But what happens in a nightclub when a little skinny guy wants to kind of beat up a bigger dude? He cold cocks him, right? Comes up beside him and cold cocks him. Well, these folks do that to us all the time. Any of you have ever voted for a prop in your neighborhood? I don't know what they call them in Europe, but it's the little tiny additions to your ordinances in your local state or province or what have you. And they'll say, hey, we have a gas tax. And they want to, it sounds like they want to make a gallon of gas cost more. But here in California, they made the car registration go up. And so, it's like, hey, we're going to build the Golden Gate Bridge and it's going to cost X number of cents to cross the Golden Gate Bridge until we pay for the bridge. And then they pay for the bridge. And then the fee never goes away. And today it's something like almost $10 to cross it one way. And some people live across the bridge and work in San Francisco, so they're blowing $20 a day. Unreal, right? Well, this is going to be a story like that. And it's always something that is brought to us like a wolf in sheep's clothing. And that's what this whole thing was presented like, sort of a Robin Hood formula, but it ended up being a really bad situation. Now, if you think this is just a story about America, listen up. This is for every first world country on planet Earth, and I'm not quite sure if it's penetrated third world nations, but I wouldn't be surprised. What this dude did, who got out, who I cannot find his name, he's probably Farben, I don't know, is he developed an idea to create a trade commission. And this was that trade is obviously associated with money, and money is associated with profit. So if someone doesn't care about this globalist idea of controlling food, but they're like, well, can you make money doing it? Oh, he's like, oh yeah, hell yeah. That's like one of the instant byproducts of this plan. Then you get a lot of people on board really, really quick. So this thing incubates. It takes them a little while to get things on board. But by 1962, they laid out a full plan to control all world food, including organic food, by December 31st, 2009. And they developed, with this trade commission, 4,000 guidelines. Okay. Which typically a guideline is like, hey, you shouldn't smoke cigars. You shouldn't eat too much sugar. You should exercise every once in a while. Those are guidelines. Well, these guidelines have become the codex, the rules by which this Trade Commission actually functions. And so if you don't follow the guidelines, then you can't push any food through the Trade Commission. Well, as this got bigger and bigger and bigger, all food in the world goes through this commission, which is going to get a different name in just a little bit here. Now, it should be said that all these guidelines that I'm going to tell you about are not laws anywhere in any country. The only thing that's happened is, because laws take, your representatives to be informed about it, talk about it, vote on it, right? Not this stuff. This is what we call a treaty. You agree that you're going to get your supplies from this organization, and thus you adopt their rules. Good example? Okay, well, you put your kid in local school. The local school decides what classes your kids have available, what classes your kids are able to take at a particular age. What are the prerequisites? Do you need to buy them pencils, pens, paper, erasers? They decide. You want to buy something from Amazon? Well, you're going to adhere to all the Amazon rules. You want to post something on social media? You got Twitter rules, Instagram rules, Facebook rules, etc. There's a woman out there, her name's Dr. Rima Leibau, and she's where I'm getting a lot of this from. But you can look it up from all different angles. It still all holds true, and it only gets more and more intense as time goes on. But these guidelines ended up being the rules by which all food is regulated in the world. So in 1893, in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, this sort of methodology of developing guidelines to govern a society started to take shape from a lot of previous experiences, which we're going to talk about, which laid sort of the bedwork for what now has become the World Health Organization and the Food and Agriculture organizations that govern us today. The way this organization works internally is that they will take on a particular discipline of food, and their spectrum within the Trade Commission was anything that could be put in the mouth except pharma. Why not pharma? Because this is coming from I.G. Farben's brain power. He knows pharmaceuticals because that's what he's involved in, and he definitely doesn't want to create any rules for himself, just rules for us. Isn't that nice? The committees meet within this organization, and they boil it up to the point where they get to what they call level 8. And that means it's ready for a vote to be ratified within this organization. And that organization is now called the World Trade Organization, WTO. And that is what you and I are under today when it comes to all the food that we eat, all the water that we drink, all the vitamins we're allowed to take. And it gets scary. Now, the World Trade Organization accepted the Codex Alimentarius methodology, their 4,000 guidelines, officially in 1994. And that meant that their 30 some odd years of churning this thing around just became official. So now imagine that you're a country and you wanted the benefits of this World Trade Organization because they started to consume, all the countries that generate food. And you realize that if, let's just say as an example, Greece, this is made up, okay? Let's say Greece didn't necessarily want to get involved with someone else regulating their food. But let's say Greece doesn't create all the food that's necessary for them to feed their people. They need a little help every once in a while. You buy some grain from somebody else, they buy some milk from someplace else, something they don't have in their strategic resource pool. Maybe they don't have enough, maybe they don't have any. And they go over to, let's say, Italy and say, hey, you know what? Can we have some of your grapes? Because we like wine too. We like grapes. And they say, well, we now comply with this World Trade Organization, so you're going to have to talk to them. We've signed an agreement with them, a treaty with them. It's not really a treaty, but it's an agreement, a contract. And so then Greece goes over to the World Trade Organization and says, well, you're not compliant nor a member of the World Trade Organization, so you're going to have to become compliant to join the World Trade Organization. And then once you become compliant, then you can enjoy all of the spoils of all the countries that have signed on to this thing. Well, then Greece has to do everything it possibly can to get those 4,000 guidelines and pollute all their food, potentially, to join this organization, to get any help at all with their strategic resources. But there's a problem for most civilized countries. Because up until the late 90s, when all this conspiracy came together and formed the now Codex Alimentarius World Trade Organization, well, people have been feeding their people for a long time. We've had the FDA and the CDC and the EPA for decades and decades prior to this World Trade Organization. It's not even formally based in the United States. So we've got laws for how we regulate pharmaceuticals, chemicals that we can use, any of the biotech, any agriculture, and medicines in general. And there's different ways that things are granted to the people. And we'll get to that in just a second. So in 1994, they assumed the Codex Alimentarius in its current state. But that organization didn't continue its power grab. Didn't cease their power grab. They continued to develop more guidelines, in flying quotes, until 2013, July 4th, they ratified a brand new set of guidelines that controls the vitamins and minerals that you're allowed to consume if you're going to get any compliance with them in your country. This is straight up Agenda 21 stuff, right? Remember, Agenda 21 is the only conspiracy in the world you need to understand, because below that is every other conspiracy and the motive for anything else that's happening that is not normal in the world at a globalist level, right? As of this 2009 date, December 31st, the Codex ceased to be voluntary and thus became mandatory. And that changes the whole spectrum of how this works. Now, also in 1994, we got an organization called the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, which is DASHA, as usually some people call that. But there's something called the Napoleonic Code, which I wasn't aware of at the beginning. Now, America was founded without a Democratic Party, and it was known as a republic. And republic is absolutely standing on the foundation of what we often call on this show, and everybody's familiar with this, common law. What is common law in its most fundamental form? Do no harm to others, and then we'll leave you alone. It's pretty much how it is. Think about that. That's the only law in the universe you ever need. Do no harm. And so when you're writing laws about what you can and can't do in common law, it's very, very straightforward. If they don't write a law saying you cannot consume something, then it is legal to consume it. So for instance, if there's no laws around vitamin C consumption, well, then you can eat vitamin C. It's fine. It's not illegal. But under Napoleonic Code, if a law doesn't exist that says it's legal, then it's illegal. And Codex Alimentarius is based on Napoleonic Code. Hence, the Trade Commission is Napoleonic Code. Hence, the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, this Food and Agriculture Organization, and this DASHA Dietary Organization believes, okay, because they want utter and complete control. That's why Napoleonic Code exists. I'll give you an analogy that's a little absurd, but it'll really strike you if this isn't hitting you like a ton of bricks already. Let's say there's 10 of you standing on this patio, and we'll brighten it up to 12 noon, and I walk in, and you guys agree that I'm your leader. And I say, thank you so much for electing me as your leader. Now, I just want you to know that we are now, from this point forward, on a Napoleonic code. Instantaneously, I have just told you that you can't even move a muscle in your body unless I deem it okay. It's like a military, right? Stand at attention, at ease, forward march, turn left, right? All that kind of stuff. So now imagine that sort of discipline over every single thing that you consume as food and nutrition and medicine and herbs and minerals and vitamins. Now let's move one step into lunacy of this program. Inside the Codex, they have deemed nutrients as toxins. When I was in the pharmaceutical industry, it was directly in 1994. In 1994, I drove to a pharmaceutical company every day of my life to code this package. I won't brief you on it anymore. But I remember my boss, who was not a chemist by any stretch, she was just a manager, very nice woman. She spouted off one day that vitamin C, she goes, well, they've just figured out that vitamin C is a toxin. And I was like, ooh, that's weird. And I wasn't pounding C at the time. I was very young. I was about 24 years old. And so I was like, okay, whatever. And later, when I learned about vitamin C and realized that it's absolutely it's non-toxic, you can take as much as you want. It just passes through your body. I mean, obviously, you could drown yourself with any object in the world, but within reason, 1,000, 5,000 milligrams, 10,000 in a day, you'd be fine. You won't die. I wonder now if she was aware, because she's in the pharmaceutical business and was definitely involved with 99% projects I had nothing to do with, if she had heard of this adaptation of the Codex and thus was just repeating this phrase. What is the nature of a toxin? Well, almost everybody, as soon as you understand what the word means, it kind of means, hey, we need to protect human beings from toxins. Okay. Well, so what if you're a government organization that believes anything is harmful for people? Cars are harmful without seat belts or whatever. Even a seatbelt. Let's just say someone proposes a seatbelt. All right, well, we got to find out how that thing should work, right? Mercedes went through hell putting a seatbelt in a car for the first time. So you have something called risk assessment. And risk assessment starts to get pretty insane when people without medical degrees start to engage in medical procedures, because the World Trade Organization isn't about being super accurate with what's good for you. It's about finding out what's bad for you and smuggling it into your food supply. So there's something called the LD50 test, and it has to do with the amount of chemicals you can give an animal before 50% of the animals die. So you're feeding them to rats, you're feeding them to chimpanzees if it's something super duper intense. And you keep doing it until 50% of your test animals pass away. Okay. At that point, you have a level of which you've been giving these animals a particular dosage of something. Then the geniuses, and this is insane on a level that is unbelievable, because it makes no chemical sense whatsoever. They might tell you it does, but it's absolutely arbitrary. And so what they do is they take this LD50 test. Let's just say, for instance, a rat, if you give it 50,000, milligrams of vitamin C, the creature starts to die because it doesn't have anything else in its system. And it's like, I need nutrition, I need water, I need food, blah, blah, blah. They divide that dosage, whatever it is, that killed 50% of the animals, by 100. It's almost a complete nonsensical, arbitrary mathematical equation, and that's what becomes healthy for a human being to consume in terms of dosage. So the other thing that gets kind of strange, besides potentially ratcheting down what might be healthy for you simply because they killed an arbitrary animal and they're dividing it by 100, which means your dosage can never get high enough to get a level of nutrition that's good for you. They have deemed a bunch of toxins okay for the human body. In the Codex Alimentarius, fluoride is good. And where did they learn that? Well, I've heard this from so many sources that don't know each other that for me, this is factual history, which is that during the concentration camp phase of World War II, where not only the Jews, but all kinds of folks were held in those concentration camps, they fed them fluoride in the water because it made them complicit, docile, weak. So they could do anything to them, and their pineal glands were completely rotted inside. The fluoride was rotting their teeth, giving them osteoporosis, reducing birth rates, and rotting the very circuit inside your brain that connects with your soul that gives you life. So you just become a little bit of a zombie, right? The Codex also mandates that we neutralize very healthy things like cow milk. Now, the worst thing about cow milk is that it makes you fat. It just is very, very fatty. Okay. So for instance, 100% milk has 4% fat in it. And that's why 2% is half and 1% is a quarter. So I understand some people are lactose intolerant, what have you. You have to kind of eat it to make it happen. But now imagine this. If you're going to consume milk, I will always tell you personally, for me, raw milk is the way to go. It's got all the enzymes and stuff inside the milk that is good for me. Plus, I grew up in Kansas. When I watch the kids out in the country come into the city, there's a big physical difference between the two of us. I was 4 to 8 inches shorter than these kids in 6th grade. My friends were 6 feet at 6th grade, almost unanimously, and continued to grow and grow and grow. And the families were famous because their sons were always gigantic beings. I mean, monstrous. By 16, they could bale hay with a raster hook. They would just reach down with a 75-pound bale of hay on the ground with the tractor going about 2 miles an hour, and they could just grab a bale of hay and put it on the back of a truck and just do this all day long. Biceps as big as your calves, right? Our city kids were all Johnny Depps, we're like under 6 feet, between 5'10" or 5'8" and 6 feet. So one of the things that the Codex mandates is that every single cow on Earth has to be treated with the Monsanto recombinant bovine growth hormone. And guess what? That cow is still considered organic, even though you get your milk from it. Interesting, right? Thought organic was organic, huh? Think again. But, okay, you're like, hey, I don't drink milk. Don't eat meat, let's just say. Something like that. Or don't eat red meat, let's just say. I do. The Codex also mandates that every single animal used for food and traded through the World Trade Organization has to be treated with a subclinical antibiotic and hormone before it can be allowed to be consumed by the rest of us. Give you another one. Unless the food is being consumed raw. All right. Every single piece of meat has to be irradiated before it can be sold in the market. So chicken, pork, anything, fish, it all has to be irradiated unless you're going to eat it raw. In terms of organic, the only stipulation for using hormones on an animal to maintain its organic certification, which includes the other two I just told you, the two procedures, the subclinical antibiotics and hormones, the bovine hormones, all they have to do is get a veterinarian organization to approve of the drug, and it's still organic. If I told you, again, I just gave this analogy in an episode that hasn't aired yet. It's about 5G. It'll go out tomorrow. This one might go 2 after that. But I give this example, and this is because we're on food. I'm going to give this example one more time. So if you've seen the last 3 shows, then you've heard this analogy, which is I get your favorite beverage that you like in the world. I get a glass. I get some Drano. I get your favorite beverage. I let you watch me make the drink. I pour a little bit of Drano in the bottom, and then I pour your favorite beverage on top. Alcoholic, non-alcoholic, doesn't matter. Fizzy, flat, doesn't matter. And I give it to you, I hear you. And then I pour myself something completely different without the Drano, and I start drinking, I go, and then you're like, what the fuck is this? And I'm like, well, that's your drink. Well, what do you mean? It's got Drano in it. Yeah, it doesn't have that much Drano in it, just a little bit of Drano. I mean, you can, it'll just go down. It might, be a little fiery hot for a little while. Maybe you'll be sick for a few weeks, but you'll be all right. Of course, you don't drink it. Well, the Codex sets extremely high limits for toxins in our food. I thought about trying to write some of these down and tell you them. I'm going to give you a website that you can go to check this out. But they're all like super duper chemical terms, but they have been permitted to give us, I think, over a dozen toxins. At some point, it's been almost 24 toxins at lethal levels. Meaning, if we were to take a sample of water with this much toxin in it and give it to a toxicology department and go, please, run a full spectrogram on what's in this stuff and then check the levels and then tell me how safe it is for human beings, you could get a lot of food that's delivered by the World Trade Organization, and they would actually say, oh my God, this stuff's completely toxic. Where'd you get this? And they'd say, oh, the grocery store. Great, right? Yeah, they actually have come down to, well, I should say people that are concerned about this whole thing have identified 12 pesticides that are allowed to be in your food that are so toxic. There have been bans, petitions to ban these toxins worldwide. It's so bad. And they categorize these under persistent organic pollutants, or POPs. Isn't that nice? So 12 of these things were banned at one point because they were so toxic. And then gradually over time, they readmitted 9 of them. This just blows the mind, man. We're in this era of change, and we need to understand the enemy so that we understand where to go to knock all this stuff down. On their list of all these different toxins that they allow in our food, 176 of them have been banned worldwide at some point in time because they've been known to be so toxic. And you have to understand, toxins create cancer, they create birth defects. I mean, there are so many pharmaceuticals that were created back in the 40s. I forgot the one that came out of Germany. We're supposed to be an antidepressant, and they recommended it to women that just had children who were going through postpartum depression, and it was responsible for tens of thousands of children in Europe and England born with no legs, born with partial legs, born with no arms, but they had the hands out of the side of their bodies. And it was a huge scandal. The pharmaceutical company that made it never went to jail, never paid any money restitution to anyone, waited about 40 years to apologize to the families, but never gave any money. Now, these people are in assisted living, with government subsidies and all kinds of stuff. So if you think that the FDA is out for your health, I can only hope that with the new president that we have, maybe. But when I was in the industry, it was just a bribery game. All they wanted to know, and this is the FDA's golden rule, at least in the past, was that if you went in there with clinical studies and your rats, for instance, developed cancer by massively dosing them, of course, right? They would ask someone in the pharmaceutical company and someone who was analyzing the protocols of the clinical study results and say, well, do you think that this can go 20 years before it shows any signs of cancer in patients. And as long as you could say, someone in the room could say, yes, we think it'll probably be about 25, 30 years before this ever gets into a cancerous state, then everybody in the FDA just goes, oh, okay, well, that's good enough. Go ahead and pass it. And why is that? Well, the FDA typically gets gutted with every presidential change because the president appoints the lead members of the FDA. They can gut the whole joint, fire everybody, or they can keep some people. But the president of the United States, no matter who they are, doesn't have the qualifications to determine who should be in any positions. So what ends up happening is the lobbyists from the past, at least, would come up with all of the complicit members. If they liked you and you're in the FDA, you're still on the list. We think this person should stay in this top position. And anybody who has ever rejected a drug or caused any problems for a pharmaceutical company, they were crossed off, and a lobbyist would move out of a lobbying position into the FDA to be a yes man or a yes woman to push through all the drugs that are coming. It's big business, right? When I was in the industry in sort of like 93 to 95, they wanted to, well, one, it took about $1 billion to finish a drug, a little over $1 billion on average. Therefore, they needed to have a $1 a dose charge to make up that money. But there was extra stipulations. And this might help your brain understand pharmaceutical companies a little bit. Back when I was in it, let's say you wanted to create a drug that grew back hair. Okay. You would be in a laboratory and you'd be messing around with some chemicals that you heard, which is always, okay, just so you know, all these things started off as herbs that did it automatically. So they'd go to China, they'd find an herb that grows hair. Then they would bring it back, take it. Oh, everyone grows some hair. That's pretty cool. Maybe not a whole head of hair, but it's better. But you can't sell an herb because it's organic. It's a thing of nature. Can't patent something that's out in the public domain, literally. So what they do is they start pulverizing this chemical compound into a synthetic. They create a Frankenstein version of the herb. Then they, as soon as they get what's called an indication, they're starting to grow hair with their synthetic on a bald rat or something, right? Then they're like, okay, they got two choices. They can covertly hold on to that indication for a certain amount of time, but eventually they have to tell the patent office that they have what's called an indication, and they file for a patent with their synthetic combination. It's not clinically ready yet. It could still kill people instantaneously. It still could create birth defects and all this other stuff. But at that point, they start to refine it. The patent in 1994 was 17 years. Now, the patent starts burning before you actually got the thing through clinical studies and able to give it to the public. So the product I created was to speed up that process, to get all the scientists on the same page. Well, the average approval rate to get through clinical studies was about 10 years, which means you only have 7 years of your patent left at $1 a dose to make your money back. Well, those have all been extended now. Some of them are biotech can get damn near 45 years of a patent. It's nuts. Yeah, and the reason why the patent starts burning is that someone could have a cure, for instance, to some major ailment like polio or mumps, measles, like a full-blown cure, not a treatment, but a cure, and not necessarily a vaccination necessarily. And they start the clock burning on you because they don't want you to have this magical thing that you can't figure out, but someone else could figure it out. And so they make you burn your patent out. So at least no more than 17 years, whatever you figured out, if you couldn't get it through clinical studies, and there's a bunch of stipulations, the patent could be abandoned at one point if you can't show you can finish up the product and you don't get your 17 years. And then the other pharmaceutical company can take what you did, figure it out, and get it out the door. So there's a reason why that happens. But now the patents go so long that that's how it works, just so that you understand. Now, the other thing is that the World Trade Organization could put in stipulations that you have to buy a certain amount of food from somebody else. And if you don't take the food that they provide you from somebody else, if they want to do that to you, if they consider it a trade violation, there's fines and penalties. And of course, then your relationship with the World Trade Organization changes. And maybe they stop sending you food. So this is where we get to the more nefarious internal planning of this organization, where the Codex, when analyzed with all of its toxic hormones and toxic toxins, pesticides that are allowed in your food, and they did a simulation against humanity and said, okay, what if humanity continues to eat all this crap? What's going to happen to humanity? They realized that just analyzing the vitamin and mineral standards, which is the lack of the vitamins and minerals that you need to be healthy, that they were going to kill anywhere from 3 billion to 1 billion through sheer starvation. Now, we all die. Okay, so some of these numbers, it means that you will die a disproportionately short, you live a disproportionately short life and then die. So that's a problem. They estimated a sheer 2 million would die simply of malnutrition. I mean, imagine dying of malnutrition, right? There are so many ailments out there that we call diseases that some doctors have proven is strictly a malnutrition situation. It's even been, I'm going to give you a controversial thing. You can go look this up from the Black Pigeon Speaks channel on YouTube. He's a very mysterious guy who lives in Canada. Apparently works for a television station. He's a little odd. He does promote a lot of globalist agendas, whether or not he realizes it or not. He's kind of a negative Nancy today about the whole world's coming to an end. He's sort of on that realm. He's joined some other channel recently. But about 3 years ago, I saw the most remarkable video from this guy. So it would probably be about 2016-ish. This is very controversial, what I'm about to say here. I've even told some of my friends, and they kind of looked at me kind of funny, like, oof. But this dude produced the studies, produced the results, basically the clinical study results. Just talking about malnutrition here. That is essentially in Europe. The exact location escapes me, but he showed the reports and the results. That they took a bunch of gay males and they had developed this shot. There was nothing more than a bunch of nutrients, and gave gay males this shot. And suddenly, almost overnight, within 48 hours, they became straight for about 3.5 months. And of course, that's sort of heresy in some people's courts. It would be, for me, it's just if you want to be straight and this shit works for you, then do it. If you want to remain the way you are, you just do that too. No bias in my world, but this was something documented. And so it starts to, if this is true, and believe me, he the whole video, he never shows his face. He shows all the documentation in official, news organizations, and he doesn't lean on anything that's really, iffy. He's usually like BBC.com or, something that you can sink your teeth into. When it comes to claims like that, it's either it works or doesn't work, right? You can't get a patent claiming that eating jujubes is going to give you better eyesight. You just can't do it, right? So nutrition is huge. Obviously, it makes for a healthier body in general. Your eyesight, for one thing, right? Your bone density, your muscle tissue, the acuity of your brain, all that kind of stuff, right? But very shortly after, the medical industry started, okay? Because in the 20th century, the 1900s, we got out of normal eating habits globally. I would say probably third world countries kept healthier, right? If they could find the food. But they very soon realized that cancer was the byproduct of all of these toxins being introduced into food, creating 5 food groups, which may or may not be healthy for you, not policing things like salt intake, everything that hardens your arteries, everything that creates plaque in your arteries. they just were like, donuts exist. Holy shit, let's just eat all those. Hey, let's just put a bunch of butter and salt on everything, right? So, when you gank the human body, especially with sugar, which is an inflammatory, meaning your blood doesn't move around your body like it should when you eat too much sugar, well, where does your immune system live? It lives in your bloodstream. Well, just like all the bicycle riders who do the Tour de France, they get testicular cancer because they're sitting on a hard leather seat, which gags the arteries that come down your butt crack and go straight to your testicles. And that's where your immune system cleans those babies out. And if you sit on it, you can not only temporarily strangle that blood supply, but you can permanently injure it if you do this every single day. So you have to be really careful. But they found that the two highest profit margins right away in the medical industry was the cancer and heart disease, because everything that they gave us instantaneously started producing these results. So we only have cancer in one person in my entire family, and she had colon cancer. She was 2 of 10 people in my hometown that survived the colostomy surgery that she had to get. The other guy lived right across the street from her grandmother, and he was an Indian chief, Native American nowadays. Great guy. I'm so glad he survived. But the both of them had that in common. But my grandmother started looking at her diet and saying, I introduced something into my diet, this is my grandmother speaking, that gave me this cancer, and it was saccharin, the little pink package that you find in every restaurant to add to your tea. When I was a kid, saccharin literally said on the package, known to cause cancer. Now go to your local restaurant and look at the back of the package. The cancer warning has been removed. But as far as I know, saccharin's exactly the same chemical mixture. So imagine this. Aspartame also causes massive cancer in the body. Okay. So someone is talking to someone else, and they're both investor class businessmen. They create opportunities, and then they make a bunch of money off of it. And some dude goes, well, we own a ton of the medical industry. Yeah, we do. Well, I got a buddy of mine over at Searle. His name's Donald Rumsfeld. Oh, who's that? Yeah, he's this military boxer guy from the Navy. He's some badass dude. He's a really bright guy. He runs Searle, and he's going to push through this new, it was a heart medication. It's 25 times or 22 times sweeter than sugar. He's making a sugar substitute out of this stuff. Okay, that's great. What do I care? What causes cancer? Oh, really? Yeah, but it's really slow. And so, I think we should put a lot of money into John Hopkins, and later on they'll simulate the coronavirus in Event 201. Now, you better believe that anyone who is of the ruling class, let's just say, we won't call them the elite, they avoid all this stuff because they have the Codex healthiness regiment. They know where all the poison food is. They know how to stay away from it. So they don't eat any of this stuff. And they also eat red meat, just so you know. So anything that is high nutrition in this world by nature is de facto illegal within the Codex Alimentarius. When Clinton was in the office, he fast-tracked this whole 1994 switcheroo to the World Trade Organization. He was also going to Epstein Island and probably raping little girls, but we're waiting for the proof on that one. But now here's the problem. Anytime that a president signs up our country to another organization like Barack Obama, who gave the internet control to ICANN, ICANN, it's an illegal alliance with a foreign entity. I don't know about your country, but if you live in the United States of America, this has to be a 2/3 majority vote by the Senate and the House in order for this to be ratified into use by our citizens. So America's relationship with the World Trade Organization is an illegal alliance of Bill Clinton and should be utterly thrown out by Donald Trump. Now, there's another organization you'll want to look up if this is interesting to you. It's called the National Nutritional Food Organization, or NNFA. The members are big pharma, and essentially this giant nutrition business that's out there today, right? All those supplement companies that are making tons of money. If you know anyone who's like a personal trainer, what have you, they will, depending on the person, if they're making money off of you, well, that's the most healthy stuff in the entire world. And of course, they always sell this same old scam. It's not to say that these products aren't good at times, but there was a company in the mid-90s called Equinox. It no longer exists as I am going to describe it because they got busted by 60 Minutes. But an old girlfriend of mine was heavily involved with Equinox and lost her life to it. She lost a husband to it, and she lost me because I was single at the time and we were going to see if we could put something together. But this place was a cult, if there ever was one. And what did they do? They sold a bunch of vitamins. But now I want you to think about Alex Jones. I want you to think about anyone that's ever tried to sell you vitamins, and they always give you the same exact story. But as far as I know, Equinox was the one that made this pitch the most popular in the whole world. They always say that the competitors use crappy products to make their vitamins, fillers, and they sell you the roots of the plant, not the plant itself. So instead of getting the mint leaf, you're eating the mint leaf branch, stem, all that kind of stuff. You hear that all the time. And that's how they do it. That scam's been going and going forever. Now, what's interesting about this, and the website, which I think has changed a little bit since the information I saw, if you just look up as separate words, I'll find the website and put it in the description below, but it was the worldfreedomusa.org was the website that'll actually really break this down. But if you just look up Codex Alimentarius, I'll put some videos down there so you can see them. What's interesting about this whole thing is that there are former military generals that have gone on world tours talking to Europeans, talking to Americans, along with Dr. Leibau, who's a woman. And they've been trying to warn people and tell them all about this kind of stuff. But and there's all kinds of presentations with all kinds of scientific proofs of what I'm saying with all those chemical names, but they actually have on the website all these chemical names and the dosages that are allowed. And then in the next column over, the dosages that are toxic to the human body, causing cancer and all kinds of other problems. And you'll find out that what's allowed is way over what is the threshold for toxicity in the human body. But just remember the analogy with the Drano and the glass. How much toxins would you allow me to pour in the glass of your favorite beverage? How much? A drop, a particle, an inch? How much? Well, the answer is always the same. None. You would let no toxins be in any of your food if you knew it was there. But how many times when you were a little kid, you hear about that there's all these weird food standards. This is all Codex Alimentarius, right? How many rat droppings are allowed in certain food supplies, right? How many worms are allowed to be ground up into your ketchup? All these horrible things. You hear them and you kind of like, well, I guess I've been eating ketchup my whole life. Well, worms are nutritious. It's cool. Maybe they are. But it's the toxins, the pesticides that are right around this whole process. Genetically modified food? Really? What clinical studies were done with that? As far as I know, none. Monsanto's, which was bought by Bayer, remember that. IG Farben before that. IG Farben was noted as making, I think, Cyclone B. But Monsanto's, they've been a poison company forever. They make glyphosate, right? The Roundup product. They're losing lawsuits left and right, which is why they sold themselves to Bayer to kind of get rid of the Monsanto name. One of my good friends did bodyguard work for the CEO of Monsanto's, whose name I think was Robert Llewellyn, which is a totally different Robert Llewellyn than my buddy. And he got in the car and he was like, why do I need to protect you, man? You just look like some normal guy. And he goes, well, a bunch of people want me dead. And at the time, he had no idea who the guy was or what he did. And eventually found out he was Monsanto's CEO. If we'd only known, The politicians in the United States of America, who aren't the brightest bunch, they don't know anything about this. They inherit this system, and believe me, anyone who's part of the World Trade Organization and who has affiliates within the United States government, the game would be to make sure no one knows about this. But these individuals running around the world and writing letters into politicians or sending emails into politicians, they have found that when they corner a politician with an interview or what have you face to face, and they just politely ask if they know what this is, they have no clue. And so, of course, when you have no clue about something, what often happens with life? You just assume it's not important. You know, you got a young person, or even anyone in their 30s, 40s, or 50s who's been drinking diet sodas their whole life, and you go, that stuff's really bad for you, right? What do you mean? I've been drinking this my whole life. Don't have any cancer yet. I have a friend of mine who died of cancer, and I kept saying, that stuff's bad for you, right? It causes cancer. And the reply I got was, it hasn't caused cancer yet. And now that he's dead of cancer, I wonder what the family thinks today. Just because something doesn't kill you doesn't mean you're not suffering from it. Dementia, Alzheimer's, amyloid plaque in the brain. Okay. Still don't know why it occurs. It's not hereditary. As much as they tell you it's hereditary. The only thing that's hereditary about a family with cancer, a family with autism, a family with Alzheimer's, is that the toxins that they're introducing into your food supply, or perhaps during a vaccination process, your body, your genetics are weak to those toxins. But because your family has never been exposed to them until the 20th century, you never knew about it. And so they're trying to guilt trip you for legal reasons. This is in your family, right? Meanwhile, your kid took 28 vaccinations in one day and ends up having convulsions in the night and then is mentally impaired for the rest of their life. Can't speak, can't talk or anything. Oh, but it was in your family. Don't sue us. You can't sue us. It was in your family. I know, in fact, before I ever woke up, I know a family that had 4 daughters. And I met the youngest daughter in the software industry in the late 80s. And there was this horrific tale. This girl told me that her mother got cancer, died, and her sisters all got cancer. And either they died or they had mastectomies, right? Their breasts removed. Okay. And she's like, it just runs in our family. But the chick always drank Diet Coke. Always. And I can only assume this is I'm going to stay nice and healthy with this Diet Coke. Did you hear that Diet Coke is going to be sponsoring the cancer drive this weekend? Irony, man. So Codex Alimentarius, the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, the Food and Agricultural Organization, the JASHA, whatever they want to call that now. These are organizations that are all underneath an Agenda 21 depopulation for profit mechanism. Now imagine, just to kind of put together the business model, you're privy to some board meeting. You're a fly on the wall in the board meeting. Maybe you're pouring drinks for people. You don't have anything to do with these folks, but you're able to listen. And they talk about depopulating, and maybe while you're listening, they've got some cases where you're like, yeah, probably should. Women in Venezuela have between 7 and 15 kids and they have no money. So maybe that's probably not a good idea, right? Kids in Africa or wives in Africa, they just do the same exact thing. 22 kids, whatever. They just have sex every single time that they're not pregnant. They get pregnant and then they have a kid. And you're thinking, all right, well, maybe we should slow that down. Get the women all educated, get them a destiny, and they'll start tapering off about 2 to 3 kids. A little bit of growth there in the population. Maybe you have 2, you sustain. You have 1, you reduce. You have 3, you grow by 1. Okay. So you're listening to it and you're like, all right, maybe we need to do something. I understand why we can't really reveal this to the public because you don't want to take anyone's birthrights away. Okay. But you keep listening and the conversation keeps going. Because right after they identify the philosophical desire to depopulate, which is that's all it is, a philosophical desire. They want to control us all. Less people, easier to control, right? All right, just ask a school teacher with too many kids in her class. And then some squirmy bastard opens his briefcase and pulls out a stack of documents. It's all the same one, stapled together. 5 or 6 pages, passes out to everybody. Now we moved on to agenda number 2 of our little plan here. Oh, things just got interesting. What is this all about, right? And the little dude goes, this is how we're going to profit from this depopulation. Why not? Everyone's like, oh, well, explain. What is your plan? Let's say everyone's just stupid, never heard of profit from loss, okay? Our loss, their profit. They said, well, we're going to be controlling the food and we're going to be toxifying the living crap out of it. We're also going to be starving people of malnutrition, starving them of nutrients, I should say. We're going to toxify all the meat and all the milk and everything. I mean, these people will not be able to escape. And we're also got this new chemtrail program, but that's another tier. It's going to start in the 1990s. Okay. Technically, it started before that, but that's when it really went full bore, right? Okay. Keep talking. These like drooling vultures. He said, well, there's going to be a lot of cancer. So I think we need to create a big John Hopkins cancer ward. Now, we'll keep the doctors in the dark. We'll definitely keep the waitress who turned into a nurse in the dark. That's super easy. They're all good people. They're going to make everyone feel nice and warm and comfy. But there's a couple ways we're going to inhibit the process. Because someone raises their hand and says, well, won't the doctors figure out what's going wrong? Won't they stop this toxicity? Won't they take a blood test or whatever? Won't the nurses realize that they gave a kid a shot and he came in the next day convulsing in the ER room and then was mentally impaired? Oh, we got all of it covered, man. Well, how do you have that covered? Well, we got a story and we got a technique. And what's the technique? Well, we are going to usurp all medical education in the entire world. What does that mean? Oh, we're going to write all the books. We've already been infiltrating the system. And anything that would lead a doctor to think for themselves will be crushed with a couple different techniques. Well, becoming a doctor means you're going to have to memorize a lot of stuff, right? Well, we're going to change the requirements of graduation each year that these poor kids are trying to become doctors. We're going to so overwhelm them that in their 10 years to become a doctor, we're going to stuff 15 years worth of information down their throat. And so only the elite kids that can memorize the other 5 years within a 10-year period are going to have any hope at all. And so we won't allow them to roam around the universe doing laboratory experiments or anything with what we teach them. They're simply going to be forced to take our word for it, or they won't graduate. Well, then we're going to put them in an internship underneath another doctor that already has completed this indoctrination system. And, they're going to learn all these pharma tables too. You got a headache and sweats. Well, that's ibuprofen. Boom, right? And so they're also going to get really rich with what they know. Whatever little they can manage to remember and put into practice, they're going to make so much money that they will not worry about anything. But at the same time, we're going to put a control mechanism in, which is we're going to allow malpractice lawsuits because these people are going to be hurting a lot of people because they don't know what the fuck they're doing. But the malpractice insurance is going to keep them on their toes because any one screw up they do from our protocol, which is certified to be good, you go into court with the protocol, you win. You do something outrageous to try and help someone and they die, well, then their malpractice will punish them for moving outside the envelope. Someone says, brilliant. And they open Seagram's or something. Now, what's the story part of the game? Well, everything needs a spin, doesn't it? So in the off chance that something starts to reveal itself, one, we'll start immediately changing the medical books to make sure that we, by technique, sort of create a blind spot for everyone. But we're going to buy the press. We're going to pay the attorneys to concoct a perfect way for us to avoid all legal liability. The number one name of the game is it's in your bloodline. That's going to address probably 95 to 98% of all risk that we might assume by teaching doctors the wrong thing. But we also own all these sort of scientific rags out there, like Scientific American, Popular Science, all those things, Time Magazine. We own them all, man. And so throughout the course of time, we are going to infiltrate everyone's understanding of the human body. And so when someone comes home and is getting a prescription for chemotherapy, well, everyone's going to say that's the right thing to do because that's the only thing that fights cancer. Doesn't matter that we kill about 93% of the patients with chemotherapy. Hasn't been innovated since 1989. All right. But everyone's going to feel comfortable with their death serum to fight the cancer that we gave them. When I did my episode on Big Pharma, which you should see, which is way back, I think, in season 1, I told you an analogy which you need to remember. And it's what you can use to easily explain this to another human being. If I said to you, hey, would you trust McDonald's with your overall health? You know, the health of your brain, the health of your digestive system, your bones, your skin. Would you trust McDonald's? Eat there every single day. Would you trust their executives on the board of directors to make sure that what you're eating is good for you? Any sentient human being on earth would immediately knee-jerk and say, hell no. Okay, well, why is that? Why don't you trust McDonald's? Well, geez, they're all private for profit. They don't care about my health. They're just trying to sell me a crappy burger with grade Z beef. So yeah, you're learning. This is awesome. You're totally awake. Now, what makes you think that Johns Hopkins cares about your life? What makes you think that any pharmaceutical company you can name on planet Earth cares about your life? How much money does McDonald's make? How much money does a pharmaceutical company make? Johns Hopkins. If you get hungry and you go to McDonald's, how much money do you part with to fill up your stomach? $12 if you get the deluxe sun version, right? How much money do you lose per month taking chemotherapy? I'll tell you, $30,000 a month if you're lucky. It's important to remember that before Donald Trump became the president of the United States, we had something called inheritance tax. And this relates right back to pharmaceuticals and the health industry. Because it's all owned by the same people. When you really go up, it's the same people own the place. Donald Trump realized the game of the inheritance tax. Again, you can keep $10 million of your parents' money if they're rich. Tax-free. Inheritance. Boom. All right. Considering you're dividing it up usually among a few children, that no one really gets the 10 million typically. But anything over 10 million, the government used to take in the United States of America, I don't know about your country if you don't live here, 50% of your money. 50% of your family's wealth gets just stolen because your family member died, which is why most family members create trusts. They move the money into real estate, all that kind of stuff, so that they don't get nabbed. But Donald Trump just got rid of it. And some people could get cynical because he's rich. No, because he understands why the inheritance tax was created. It was created so that you never amass enough wealth to compete with them. The ones that own the pharmaceutical industry, the ones that own the food industry, the ones that are behind Codex Alimentarius. You're never to get more powerful than them. All right, let's go back over to the health industry with that analogy. In my family alone, I would say through marriage, not through genetics, most of the women who lost their husbands eventually and died somewhere between 80 and 100, They had about $150,000 to $200,000 in the bank by the time they needed to use that money to survive in a hospice situation, or at least an assisted living situation. The last number I had was that in 2004, a family member of mine, through marriage, had to be admitted to assisted living, and obviously eventually in the last few years of her life, hospice. But just assisted living. This woman was able to walk, dress herself, no problem. She just couldn't quite take care of all the faculties to keep herself well fed all day long and that kind of thing. We housed her in Texas, just outside of Dallas. Her monthly bill was $24,000 a month. Nothing special. Wasn't bad. Wasn't like a Rockefeller, Club Med. But they start the draining process as quickly as possible. And that's if you're healthy. My friends that have died of cancer, oh my God. Well, you know how the insurance companies work. They got little clauses in there. If you start dying of cancer, we'll cover you for a couple months. But if you can't totally cure cancer in a couple months, well, then we're just going to dump your policy. Or we'll only start paying 5% or 10%, and then you're stuck with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of bills. They bleed you dry. That's why they love this whole game. Do you think these people want to fix this problem? Hell no. Politicians that are aware of what's going on, you don't think that they have a couple summer homes that were gifted to them? That Bugatti, that Lamborghini, the trip somewhere, some other guarantee, some other way. When you get out of that Senate job, come over to us. You can be a lobbyist. We'll pay you 3 times as much as you're making as a senator. But we want your Rolodex, and we want you to go in there and affect change that benefits us. If you can't do that, you're out. That's why when Trump came in, he put a moratorium on lobbyists. Again, the more you understand about the world, the more that dude looks like fucking Superman, which is why everyone, regardless of their affiliation in the world, supports this man who understands Agenda 21 and Codex Alimentarius. But we got a lot of work to do in the 21st century before we're safe. The dive on this subject matter can get deep. The videos, I have not found any video worthwhile that isn't at least an hour long. In most cases. This is your health, regardless of how old you are. This is the health of your children and the legacy of your entire family line. If this goes unchecked and continues going in the direction it's going, it's only going to get worse. Right? Remember, they brought back, 9 of the 12 toxins, all at lethal levels. Okay, well, you don't think that there's a committee meeting like once a year at least that says, how are we going to get the rest of the 176 that were banned worldwide back on the list? The second that a deep state shill becomes your president, becomes your representatives, your prime minister, your chancellor, whatever, this stuff just goes through like a goose, man. Like shit through a goose. It's super duper fast. Well, the food's going to look the same. It's going to look the same. How many of us have a garden in our backyard that we grow everything that we eat? If you like meat, how are you going to handle that? You're going to have to find some farmer out there who refuses to sell his meat to the World Trade Organization, which you can't really exist with a big pasture in meat unless you do that, right? Maybe he keeps a little herd off to the side. And there's a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge agreement you have with that dude to give you the fresh beef, fresh chicken, fresh turkey, whatever you like to eat. Now, what's kind of cool, and I know that this isn't the case, some of these rules are definitely skirted locally where I live, is that there's a lot of fish restaurants around here. And in fact, one of them, I was involved with his restaurant and a redesign that he did through another friend of mine. And this dude catches his fish from the ocean every single day and slaughters it at the dock and then brings all the cuts into his restaurants, and they're not irradiated. A lot of it is raw, like poke, sushi, all that kind of stuff. As long as you're not eating bluefin tuna, you're going to be all right. Eat yellowfin tuna, and you can have some yellowtail, and you'll be all right. It's just as delicious, so why not? So if you are working with folks in your local area that claim things are organic, you may want to go look up what is allowed and then ask them, okay, are you using veterinarian certified hormones, veterinarian certified this or that, the subclinical hormones and antibiotics and that kind of stuff. You might want to ask. This is another layer, another wing on the house of Agenda 21, which has also been renamed Agenda 2030. So you're going to see this episode in the midst of, if you catch it when it releases, in the midst of this coronavirus thing that's going around the world right now. At least the movement that is that whole thing. Did you ever believe in your lifetime that you would be on planet Earth, whereby countries that aren't involved with the world banking system barely have any cases, and the countries that are getting fiat currency from these world bankers are having these super pandemics, and we're all locked, technically, spiritually, we're supposed to be in our house, we're supposed to be self-quarantined, sheltered in, all this kind of stuff. I mean, you realize that, I think about 90% of my friends are not allowed by law at this point to go to work. All right, well, how long is that going to last where no one has any money? But, landlords expect rent, banks expect payments on cars and whatever. Plus you have to eat, So if you think that this stuff isn't true, or you think this stuff is being oversold by me, I guarantee you do your research and you will find that I brought this to you in one of the most calm states of mind that you will ever see anyone present this information to you. The truth of the matter is that it is much more severe and immediate, and you've been inside this envelope with me, depending on how old you are. Imagine you were born in 1994. Then you've been inside this your whole life. My kid has been inside this envelope her whole life, and I didn't even know until recently. So if you know anything else about this, you have other links or whatever, please put all that in the description down below. But you do owe it to yourself to get informed about this, such that when the subject comes up, you have the facts. And you probably should look at not only their current policies and intention, but look up those that are fighting for this truth. Because unfortunately, the voices that are most prominent, like Dr. Leibal, and there's this military general guy who's also out there doing it. He might be passed by now, but I'm not sure. But get out there and look, because the folks that are aware of this are aging, and there's only so much they can do. Now, you'll find that older people believe that you can write a letter or send an email and it's going to affect change because of some algorithm where one email is associated with 13,000 people with the same feelings. And so the old boomer strategy of fixing these kind of problems is to give a politician the fear of non-reelection. I can assure you that everything I've seen online, there ain't nobody on the Hill worried about being non-elected because of Codex Alimentarius knowledge. They simply aren't. The only way this is going to start to affect their nervous system in terms of being reelected would be if the keyword for this starts to trend. It starts to become a viral thing that people understand. But think about what I just explained. Was it easy to understand? Maybe. But it's tough. It's tough. And if the other thing to remember out of all of this is that our association with the WTO is potentially illegal because no one voted on it. And that little thread in the sweater could be pulled pretty intently to unravel a bunch of other organizations that we are complicit to, of which our legal system has not ratified properly / legally. So you might want to check your own country as to when they adopted it. But I would say if you're in the European Union, you probably are absolutely ratified into this. because that's where all the money goes. It goes into the World Bank, the IMF, that serves the World Bank. And I'm sure that they're completely 100%. Now, if you're in Britain, maybe not. Ireland, Scotland, don't know where your laws go, because I know Britain decides things and you do it, and I don't know how that works. Australia, New Zealand, not sure. But it's something to check out. So anyway, again, post anything you know in the comments below. And if you have not been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. I'll give you the short bumper today. Lots of links down below to all these sources. So definitely get down there if you just want to quickly go over there. But we have at least 2 reliable video sources with all the videos. We have 2 reliable sources for all platforms for audio podcasting. We have 4 social media. We have a locked Facebook group with some of the coolest people on planet Earth. You need to get in there and become a member. It's locked, so no one gets to see what you discuss. It's your private little world. We also have a couple ways to donate to the show, PayPal and Brighteon. Brighteon gets you in the credits forever. Gets the videos like these, the numbered videos, before everyone else typically, as well as a 20% discount on the store. The store has 2 designs in it right now for season 5. Those will disappear after the season's over. So if you get this late, it's too late to get those shirts. Season 1 has been completely remastered. It is on a completely different channel. We're starting to get some fair subscription counts over there. So if you want to see how the show started, I think it's a fun archaeological dig. Most of the videos, at least 51% of the videos in season 1 are for you, for self-improvement, to make you more powerful as a human being. So it's my version of like a Tony Robbins course with hardcore analysis of all things. So get over there and take a look. But other than that, take care of yourself and someone else, and I will see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.